Greetings, infinitely precious and unconditionally loved folk out there who might be listening in this moment or in any moment. I always like to begin by reminding you of something that's important for you to remember as you walk through your daily life, which is that you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Today, I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about grief and grieving, and maybe offer a thought about some tools for dealing with loss. Let me say that there's no simple or correct way, there's no one way to do it, and despite the fact that there is a list of the stages of grief, you don't necessarily go through all of them or in any particular order. And you can always look up stages of grief if you want to find out what they might be. I recently lost a very good friend, someone who I'd only known, it occurred to me, just over 4 years. But during those 4 years, we had talked to each other 2-3 times a month, and often saw one another on our journey during Zoom meetings. And I considered him to be a very good friend. And so when he died in December, and then this past weekend, I was part of a gathering to remember him. I've been thinking about grief, and I was reminded recently in a conversation with my son, Joshua, that we all feel grief in different ways, and that we do it at our own pace, and that no one else can tell us how to feel or how long to feel. Having said all those things and encouraged you to find yourself in the midst of grief and find your own pace and way of working through your loss, one of the things that I have found meaningful that I thought I'd share with you is meaning making through storytelling. And by storytelling, I mean think of those when you're going through a loss, perhaps the death of a close friend or family member, someone, and you're dealing with that shock and that pain that comes with the loss. Telling stories about that person, about what gave meaning to your relationship with that person. Telling those stories helps you find and helps others around you, perhaps if you tell those stories to someone else, find meaning in the midst of their own pain. One of the ways that human beings make meaning is to tell stories. Stories help us express the way we feel. We may not be able or willing or particularly good sometimes at describing I feel a certain way. I feel sad, I feel alone, I feel bereft, I feel broken, I feel empty, I feel overwhelmed. Maybe you can name what you're feeling, but also telling a story is a way, and it's a safer way perhaps in some ways, of really expressing what has meant something to you, particularly when you tell that story about someone else. One of the things that happened at the gathering I went to this weekend was an opportunity to tell stories. And many of the stories were stories I had never heard before. Obviously, I'd only known Thomas for about 4 years, but lots of other good stories. And in each of the stories, I could hear echoes of the things I knew. So I encourage, I have had the opportunity in a lifetime to do a number of funerals and memorial services for folks. And I find that the time when you tell stories, and oftentimes it's after the memorial service, after the funeral. Some families don't want to make a lot of open space in the middle of that, and that's perfectly all right too. But those stories that you can tell afterwards to one another that make you laugh, that make you cry, that remind you of all the feelings you had about the person who's gone, the frustrations as well, can help to bring about the healing process as you name what that person, what they meant to you in your life. So, if you're experiencing grief or loss, there is no magic way to cross to the other side. You can deny it, you can be angry about it, all the other feelings that are parts of the stages of grief. But in the end, you're going to have to find your way through. I encourage, as one of those ways, use your journal to write down some stories of meaningful ways that you interacted with the person who's gone. Use conversations with other people who knew that person to share some stories, and also with people who didn't know them. You can, people who care about you, who want to hear from you, you can tell stories about why a person who's gone was meaningful to you. And those stories can help bring the healing process in your life. Just a thought about how to deal with your grief, using one of the tools that I find has been very meaningful to me, particularly over the last month as I told stories about Thomas. A friend from high school recently died that I didn't know quite as well, but I've told some stories about him as well. It's a way of reminding me about the loss that I felt and about the meaning that each of these folks had in my life. So I wish you all the best, and talk to someone who cares about you. Become part of a grief group where you talk and tell stories and support one another. Whatever seems like a way that can help you in your grief. I wish you the best on this. And remember, you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Even in the midst of your pain and loss and grief, you are precious, a gift, and loved. Until the next time.